and we'll see how this goes. Great. I'm in the middle of editing the uh, um, tribute to you seniors from the when we lit the football fields up, and it's a distraction. I'm very close to finished, and I got caught up in it there just a few moments ago. So let me just clear my screen here so I'm not opening up too much stuff, and we can get started. Yes, leave that. And that's one, and that's two, and that closes. I am just going to spend some time narrating my computer activity. All right, this is the big one, right? That's good. Okay. All right, I think I'm in pretty good shape. Okay, thanks. Let's see who's here. Nathan has written something in what appears to be mock Chinese at some point in the chat.
All different types of languages that just say meow.
Great. I'm so pleased with your innovativeness. Um, and Julietta, multitasking is actually impossible, not just bad, but you know, that's life. So we'll pass that on to another time. Hey, Liz. Okay, I'm gonna head back here so I can see someone. I anticipate the cats don't think in languages. I would say, I think the cats all speak cat sound. Like I don't even think it's a language. If you want the truth. Cat languages don't have any consistency across the board. They simply respond in relationship to the human. They speak an It's not really a language. See, this is the thing, and we're going to get to this. It's a nightmare. You've just opened up a nightmare. So the next philosopher we're going is going to make your brains drip out. It'll be either next week or the week after. We have this weird break where you get to catch up with work next week. So I'm not sure how it's going to fit together, but I'm sure you have noticed if you have looked at the lesson outline and listened to my brief overview that this week is going to be different than what we've done before. We take a little break for the next almost 2 weeks until we get to Wittgenstein, and we're going to play around with the ideas that Nietzsche has presented. So this next week is really about practically applying some of the things that Nietzsche says to philosophy. Hold on one second. Or romantic art. And then we have on the other side of the equation the world of the Dionysian, which is the world of the inebriated, of alcohol, of party, of dance, of all of that kind of stuff. And so those are the two positions that Nietzsche says are what form tragedy. Your Dionysian experience in the awareness of the Apollonian death and structure is what creates that experience for people, or the experience of art, and ultimately what creates something that is artistic. And we look back to Kant. Kant's going to say that art is something called the sublime, that which causes shock and awe in you. So, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's also a mediocre movie and a particularly good radio series. And Hitchhiker's Guide, there's a great line where this main character, who's the most arrogant being in the Beeblebrox, goes into a machine called the Total Perspective Vortex. And when he enters it, it simply shows you the entire galaxy at one moment, and then with an arrow pointing at you that says, you are here. And it shows you how small, infinitesimally unimportant you are. And in that moment, that sense of perspective, weak, imaginable, because you just have to do the work. And most of the work doesn't provide you with very much intellectual engagement. It's about experience. So you really have to give into it, or have other people give into it with you. And we'll sort of work our way through that. So let me begin with the Dadaists briefly, and I'll talk about who they are and what they believe. Dada is, for the most part, and you guys can all hear and see me. Am I correct? Give me a thumbs up or something, because I'm really starting. Yes, thank you. Dada begins right after, well, it begins really during World War One, but right before World War One, there's a group of artists living in Germany, living in Berlin, and they find your shoes. If you've seen the movie 1917, you get an experience of this. Although that movie is so personal, it removes some of what the long-term wrenching horror of the experience was. And that awfulness, that discovery, and this group of artists, they all go to Zurich. And when they get to Zurich, what they do is they discover, I see a question, to shake those people into understanding the horror that was happening and to move them out of their um, stayed victory, much of which was silly. Some of it was based in primitivism. They wore masks when they performed. They wore giant cardboard suits. They read poems that were just gibberish, acting as if they were language. They did bizarre dances. Uh, This strange performance art kind of world that they created caused so much anger by people who saw it that they would throw tomatoes at them. They would demand their money back. They'd become violent in the space. At the same time, a guy named Marcel Duchamp, who is an American, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art has, or is living in America, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art has the largest collection of Duchamp's work, and you can go see it right one. Duchamp is disgusted with the staid and conservative nature of the art world. And so he begins to try and challenge the arrogance of the art world by creating art that he does not believe they will accept, the art community will not accept, and then sort of jams it in their face. And in 1915, he creates a ready made Philadelphia Museum of Art, but it's actually an original. If you understand how ready-mades work, he also submitted something called the Fountain, which is a urinal he laid on its side and he signed to the Society of Independent Artists show in 1917. It was soundly rejected uh, uh, by the art show because people didn't understand what he was saying, which is art is not what you think it is. Art is what the creator creates. And so when Kat, I know kids who've been in the class last year know they burned their artwork while they were making it. In some cases, they created environments where they could put a statue up with the big hammer next to it, and the artwork was called Smash Me, and your job was to smash and allow the accidental nature of the universe, the chaos of the universe, to create for them the art that they did, which caused great irritation to people. So you have an exercise this week, which is created by Tristan Zara, called The Exquisite Corpse, where you sort of make up a poem out of a cut up newspaper. And for the Dadaists, this was the way that somebody was able to actually experience the act of creation by not placing themselves in the middle of it. The intention was to create art, but that wasn't what would happen. Another thing they would do is something called automated drawing. What they would do is they just take a pen or a pencil or a brush, whatever. They'd stick it on a piece of paper, close their eyes, and they move the artwork, move the pen around and around and around. And when they would finish, they would try and find what was in that art like informative. That means the Dadaists were not about making art sitting in their home. They were about making art that people experienced actively in front of them. This is another one of these Dada collages. You can see like each of the pieces cut out of magazines or journals or textbooks with some little bit of drawing pasted together to create an image that forces you to think or reflect. Let me just see if I can. I don't think it's here. I can't show it here. There's a lot of nuns with guns here, but none of them are the Dada nun with guns. So we won't do that image. So we're looking at artwork that is primarily done to create disturb poem before you could read it. They would shout, scream things at the audience. It was a violent, aggressive movement. And I want you to go through that process of experiencing, creating something that's simply madness. That's the Dionysian portion of art. The surrealism movement I'm going to talk about briefly next is comes out of Dada. So the Dada movement is troubling in the fact that it burns you out. In 1917, Apollinaire says the word surreal out loud. By 1920, Tristan Tzara comes from the Dadaist movement and is discussed with that, makes him move into the Paris movement of the surrealism. He and Andre Breton, who's coming from Dada too, begin the process of talking about what is dreamlike. And so instead of this wild madness of dreams, and that's the other half of this. And I know we are people who fight back our dream life. Our dreams are strange and we try and manifest meaning out of them. But for the surrealists, the meaning was the experience of those to some great extent. Um, and so they they also believe very strongly in this automated drawing and writing technique, and so their work is moving towards the shocking and the beautiful and the ugly, but all through the lens of a dream. So La Chine Andalou, or the Andalusian dog, is this spectacularly deserving and causes disturbing response, but it feels like a dream. Jean Cocteau's Blood of the Poet, and Cocteau was kicked out of both the Dada and the Surreal movement when he was trying to engage in both of them. Jean Cocteau is an artist, poet, filmmaker, everything. His movie Blood of the Poet is like one giant, disturbing, and beautiful dream. And that's what you want to understand about surrealism. And surrealism exists today, although to some great extent, when Magritte dies in 1967, it as a movement moves away. So surrealism is that the only way to be creative is to be restricted. That we have had so much freedom in our creativity that it is empty. And that open freedom prevents you from really challenging yourself. Listen, I cannot stress more strongly enough the Aleppo would love the fact that you're stuck in your homes trying to learn. They would find the restriction of your experience quarantined and finding ways to create or to think within that restriction is what would make the real power of learning. The author removes the ability to use individual letters till by the end, there's very few viable letters. And that restriction creates wild creativity in his ability to tell the story. I mean, imagine writing a book, like the most common letter in French is E, or common vowel in French is E. And imagine writing an entire novel not allowed to use that letter. They would write poems where they would tell you the number of words in each line, or the rhyme scheme and the number of words you needed in each line. They created very specific structures, and some of them were manufactured, like the poem technique you're doing, where we sort of jumped to seventh letter in a dictionary, where there was an arbitrary calculations of death, like you are cut off and killed in a way in your artistic process. So that's the overarching movements, the three movements that's there. Please watch the videos about each of them. I can't lecture enough to explain these movements. This is a fun week. Enjoy yourself. Post your work so other classmates can see it. And I will continue to post additional exercises next week, both optional and required, to try and give you the opportunity both to get easy points, right? And to explore this idea of the creative process through restriction and the creative process through the vomit of drunken inebriation, the freedom of wildness with no rules except the rule that Nietzsche would be perfectly comfortable with you being drunk as long as while you were drunk you were aware of your death. Like that's where tragedy comes from. Remember, Nietzsche's not talking about morality here. He didn't care about that. Whatever you believed you needed to do is what you needed to do. But in art, the melding of inebriation and restriction was what made art really possible and work. So that's what's going on there, Brian, if you want to know that. All right. Any of you have any questions? I can't see your faces. So you got to like give me a no questions in the chat, and then I'm moving on Thank you so much for watching today. I will continue to post stuff, do your activities, catch up on your missed work. Please tell people, please, it's in a classroom with you.